Good morning, Center for Spiritual Living Palm Desert and friends all over this beautiful planet of ours. It's Reverend Charles Hall, Associate Minister, Center for Spiritual Living Palm Desert. A blessed and happy Monday to everybody. I hope your week is off to an extraordinary start wherever you are, and that you're feeling the goodness of life and drinking the sweet nectar, as it's been said. I am so grateful to be joined by an accomplished man. He's done many things, voiceover work. Probably if you've flown a plane anytime in the last 30 years, he was in-flight entertainment. He's a stage artist. He's been in major motion pictures. I don't think there's anything he hasn't done, actually, when it comes to entertainment, just looking at his bio here. And one of the coolest things is we both went to all boys Catholic high schools. That's really not the truth. It's not one of the coolest things. We're going to get into the coolest things coming up here, but that's an interesting point there too. So yeah, we both went to all boys Catholic high schools. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Don Savage. Don, welcome to the show this morning.
Good morning, Reverend Charles. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for you to take the time to be here and spend some time with us and illuminate us about the kind of the insides of your life, how you've some people that you've met, experiences that you've had, and also how the being exposed to our new thought principles has kind of fed that journey along as well. So I'm excited to dig into it here a bit. Well, as usual, an hour doesn't seem like enough when it comes to somebody as accomplished as you. So we'll dig in as fast as we can. My first question, Don, actually has to do with somebody that you say you're a sports nut. You said that you worked with Gale Sayers, and Gale Sayers just recently passed away this last week.
Yes,
which was a rock to the sports world. Give us what was your experience with Gale and maybe a story?
Well, I was working at a radio station in Carbondale, Illinois, where Southern Illinois University is located. And I was fill-in play-by-play for the guy who was doing it at the radio station. And part of the duties was to have a 5-minute interview show before all of the games with the athletic director, who was Gale Sayers at the time. So I got to interview Gale Sayers every week and talk about the games and talk about the players and mostly college sports. But it was so interesting to get to know him because he was he was a really nice man. And what I really enjoyed about Gale was he was very humble about his accomplishments. He only played for 5 years.
And made the Hall of Fame.
And he was the youngest man ever to make the Hall of Fame. I think he was 34. And interestingly enough, in 1965, the Chicago Bears had the number 3 pick and the number 4 pick in the draft. With number 3, they took Dick Butkus. With number 4, they took Gale Sayers. Well, they hit the mother load.
Cha-ching.
They hit the mother load. And I was able to work with Gale. They did a charity event in which they showed the Brian song, which was all about Gale Sayers and Brian Piccolo. And I was sort of the MC for that.
Oh, cool.
And so I was there, and watching that movie with him at my side was a real big thrill.
Holy smokes.
Very big thrill. And he was telling me, he just said that his knees were very, very bad ever since his career. He said in the wintertime, he said he could barely get out of bed without his wife's help.
Wow.
He was really happy because he had 5 surgeries or something. And back then, those were brutal surgeries. They can do a lot more now.
Yeah, not so invasive, right?
So it was a thrill working with him and meeting him, and very, very sad, of course, when I heard he passed away. Yeah.
He impacted a lot of lives. He impacted mine through the movie Brian's Song. And folks, if you want a tearjerker, if you want to cry sometime in the night, watch Brian's Song. I mean, it's a moving tribute to these two.
Grown men cry. Grown men cry at that.
Grown men cry. Grown men cry. That's right.
There is crying in football.
There is crying in football.
Mhm.
So you met James Garner when you were a boy. That's your favorite childhood memory.
Oh my God. Well, yeah. Well, Gilmore Rizzo was telling you his James Garner story
he
a
sure
few weeks
did.
ago, right?
Yep.
And it was so funny because back in believe it was 1957, my dad was a loan officer at City National Bank in Beverly Hills, and he got us backstage passes or a backlot tour of 20th Century Fox.
Oh, cool.
So on that tour, I saw Elvis Presley and Barbara Eden. I went back to my dad's bank and I saw Bing Crosby and Darrell Hickman.
Wow.
It was like walking through a Hall of Fame. And then driving up in his black Corvette convertible was James Garner. And I could not believe it. I said, oh my God, it's James Garner. And he had his wife with him. They went down to a little beauty shop. He dropped her off and they had gone into the beauty shop. And I noticed that his parking meter had run out of time. So I put a nickel in it.
Oh,
so well, I couldn't let Maverick get a ticket. So when he came back, I said, Mr. Garner, I said, I was so proud of myself. Your meter ran out and I put a nickel in it for you. And he said, well, thank you, buddy. He said, I really appreciate it. So he dug in his pocket, got a nickel, put it in my hand. He said, I don't want to owe anybody. So got in his car and drove off. And then I just thought that was the most wonderful day of my life. Well, then fast forward from 1957 to 1977, I'm with my 7-year-old son in Hollywood. James Garner is shooting an episode of the Rockford Files, and they're at some little seedy motel taking a break on location. And I had my son on my shoulders and we're watching the action, and he starts talking to my son. And so then I engaged him in conversation and I said, I met you way back when you were doing Maverick. I said, you had your black Corvette, and I told him I said, and your meter ran out of time. And he looks at me and he says, and you put a nickel in it.
That's so great. You remembered.
I said, you remembered. He said, you know why I remember? He says, back then, everybody wanted something from me and you didn't. You didn't ask for an autograph. You didn't ask for anything. He said, you just did it. So he said, I did remember that. So I thought to myself, boy, that says a lot about him.
Absolutely.
He to remember things like that. So anyway, that was my wonderful James Garner story that I cherish. I really cherish that.
So when you're walking through the lot, the back lot tour at 20th Century Fox, did you know who all these characters were at the time?
Well, I knew who definitely knew who Elvis Presley was. I mean, he was 57. He was the hottest singer on the planet. I believe he was shooting Flaming Arrow or Love Me Tender. I forget which one of those movies he was shooting there, but I mean, maybe it wasn't even one of those. But I remember Audie Murphy, the old actor Audie Murphy, was also on the set. And I said, and Barbara Eden, she was shooting some little scene outside of a building on the lot, and I have no idea what it was, but I knew who she was. And so, I mean, I think I've always been fated to meet celebrities, even from the day I was a little kid. My brother Drew was born at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, which is now Cedars-Sinai.
Cedars-Sinai, yep.
And when he was born, my mother was in the same maternity ward as Judy Garland. She was he was giving birth to Joey Luft at the time, 1955, and my mother was just so thrilled that she was in the same maternity ward because she saw Mickey Rooney come in to visit and Frank Sinatra come in to. My mom got back home. We lived in Alhambra, which is a little suburb of LA. And she was like, I think she felt like a celebrity too now because she's seen all these people. This housewife from Alhambra had gone to the mountaintop,
We've all got our own trajectory, don't we? So Don, is that how you got in? Is that how you were introduced to or became interested in the entertainment industry then?
No, not really, but in high school, I got involved with theater, drama, choir, that sort of thing. And which was really great because I think going to an all-boys school for me was probably a good thing because I didn't have that little extra Y chromosome distraction or whatever, whichever chromosome it is. But I could actually buckle down and actually work on my studies and work on my extracurricular activities and not be bothered with all that. So it was really great. And then when I got into college, I started working at the Ice House in Pasadena, which is a very famous comedy club now, but at that time it was a folk club. and I got to meet all the great acts who came through the association, and Pat Paulsen and the Smothers brothers, and Steve Martin and David Letterman, Lily Tomlin,
Wow.
all those people came through to perform there. And that was great. Even when I was in the service, my commanding officer was Jackie Cooper, the actor.
So
in the
seriously,
reserves.
there's nowhere you can go where you're not going to meet somebody who's done.
Honest to God. I mean, honest to God, I was stepping in celebrity my whole life. It just, I sort of say I was basking in their reflected glory, because that's exactly what it was for me. I mean, I just got to meet all of these wonderful people. And then when I got into radio, it even continued, even more, because then I started to meet a lot of musicians.
Mm.
And
I saw there was a picture you sent with Ringo, right? Ringo Starr?
Yeah, absolutely. I got to meet Ringo, and I did an interview with him when he did his Liverpool 8 album. When he released that, I did an interview with him, and he's marvelous. He's a really interesting man. And the picture that I took with him, I said, I asked him, I said, could we get a picture together? He said, absolutely. He said, I tell you what, why don't I hold the mic so it looks like I'm interviewing you? And that's what we did. He's got a wonderful sense of humor, and he's really, really a lot of fun. The one thing he didn't want to do was talk too much about the Beatles.
Yeah.
But of course everybody asks him, and I think he expects it. But he wanted to kind of concentrate on his project. So
yeah, that's a big one. It's going to just follow you around no matter what, right? I mean, you were a Beatle.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's going to be on your tombstone,
Yeah. So what about a different type of celebrity? One of our very own superstars is your wife, Reverend Lori Savage. How did the two of you meet?
We met at a Center for Spiritual Living in Sierra Madre, California, and it was really interesting because my wife had died. She had cancer, and she passed away. And my wife at that time, she had dragged me to a religious science church. I wanted nothing to do with religion. I had done it. And she said, oh, come with me. And so I did, and I really was starting to enjoy it. It was resonating with me. And so we started going together all the time. And then she got sick and she passed away. And Lori was at that center at the same time. She had just started going to that center because she had moved from Massachusetts. And so we just sort of connected, and she really helped me through a lot of what I consider dark terrain that I was doing. She really was very supportive, and really spiritually saw me through things. And, that developed into a friendship and into love. And then now 14 years later, we're married.
Hey.
I mean, we've been married for 14 years, but we met in 2000, and we met in late 2003.
Oh, okay. Living the good life, huh? Living the good life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And she has worked so hard, and she is so steeped in the teaching.
Yeah.
And I really admire her because she walks the walk, and she doesn't, when I need to get talked down from the ledge, she's there. It's nice to have somebody in your life to do that.
Incredibly important. I've been so grateful to have the same thing, Don. Incredibly important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And when we can do that for each other, that's great.
Absolutely.
As a voiceover artist, were you coached in your voice, or were you just blessed with how it sounds right now? Because you do have the voice.
Yeah. Well, how it sounds is probably the least important thing, because if you listen to commercials, or you listen to anything on TV where you're seeing commercials, it's pretty much every man voice. Sometimes you'll hear the quote unquote announcer voice, doing promos and things like that. But it's generally that everyday voice. So I always say anybody can do voiceover if you're willing to develop a craft around it. Your voice is yours. It's unique. It's like anything else. Your style is your style. And that's your calling card. Nobody else is like you. You're the one in a million, one in a billion. Yep. So I started doing it in radio. When I was in radio, a lot of our clients at the radio station asked, would you mind voicing our commercials for us? So I started doing that, and then I just continued on. I got an agent, And I went on to do a whole bunch. I did AC Delco and Carnation and Bridgestone tires and Toyota and Nexium and Albertson. Any number of stuff. The 80s and early 90s were my heyday of doing a lot of that work. And then I also got involved a lot more with theater and with film as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But voiceover is it's definitely a skill set. It's definitely and it's acting. You know, we refer to ourselves as voice actors because you are a persona, and you have to project whatever persona the client wants you to project.
Yeah, it's interesting, Don. I've seen just maybe once or twice some of the behind the scenes footage, like when some of the more famous film actors are recording voices for some animated show or something like that, and they're very animated when they're in the booth performing. So they're actually really getting into the character. It's not just standing there doing it. That was fascinating to me as well. They become the character. Yeah.
Well, because your body is energetic, and that energy has to be there on a cellular level. So it's like I talk with my hands a lot. It's just that's my energy. But when you're creating a character behind the microphone, you can't believe the contortions people go through to capture what it is they want to do. And even if you're doing a regular read, I mean, you're very involved. You're very involved with doing it. And sometimes you just go into what they call tags. I was doing AC Delco for a number of years. I don't remember. Do you remember when Chuck Yeager was doing the AC? Chuck Yeager was a test pilot.
Yep.
And he was doing the AC Delco ads, and they'd have him out on location and doing all these ads. I did the tags for all of those commercials. The tagline was AC Delco parts. They don't just fit, they match. Those were the tags. That's all I got paid to do, was come in and record a bunch of tags for a bunch of different commercials. And the money was insane.
That'll work.
The money was insane. I used to tell all my on-camera actor friends, I said, I make more per hour than Tom Hanks.
That's great.
I came in and worked for 15 minutes and I just made 12 grand. How does that sound?
Holy smokes. Well, yeah,
or something, Yeah. But the idea, it was an insane amount of money for a very short amount of time.
All right.
Because you got residuals and stuff like that.
Well, when we're done with this interview, we'll talk about how I can get into that business. Okay.
You have a job.
I sure do. Well, 15 minutes, 12 grand.
I know. You can do it on your lunch hour.
That's right. Let's see. Answer this. Define interesting however you want. Most interesting character, person you've ever met, and why?
Oh my God. I think probably in terms of people that I'm thinking now of people that I've interviewed. For me, it was Rosemary Clooney. Basically because of her history, but she told such wonderful stories. She could weave a story, she could tell it. And she lived in George Gershwin's last home. And she had been in that home since the 50s. And I told her, I said, well, it must be marvelous to live in this home, because her husband showed me around the house and everything. And she said, you know what? Sleeping in that master bedroom, she said very conspiratorially, I don't know if you believe in this sort of stuff, but the walls do talk. And she was dead serious. And I asked her about, I said, what is the most interesting memory you have in this house? And she said, well, it's when she was married to Jose Ferrer, the actor. We used to have Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh over for dinner. We used to have Nat Cole and his wife Maria, and we used to have Ira Gershwin and his wife Leonora, because they lived next door. they used to come over for these private little small dinner parties. And she says, one of my fondest memories was we had just finished dinner in the dining room and were about to have dessert. And Nat Cole, she said, Nat got up and said, we need a little music with dessert. He walks into the living room and starts singing and playing Mona Lisa on the piano.
Wow.
And she says, it doesn't get any better than that. So, you know, she had just a wealth of stories of her life. I was only supposed to be there for an hour to interview her, and we sat there for 2 hours.
Those are special times, aren't they?
Absolutely. She was very fascinating.
That's why I'm so grateful to have this time with you, is just to harvest that wealth of experience and storytelling. Who doesn't love a great story, right? Some experience with that we've had that inspires us, that moves us somehow.
Absolutely. And everybody's interesting. That is the main, you know, you could read the obituaries in the paper every day, and I guarantee you can come up with one screenplay for one of those people.
It's a fascinating idea.
Everybody is interesting in their own way, and uniquely so.
Before we came on, you said, I was kind of, we were teasing around a little bit. I said, I didn't get into the ministry to become an interviewer, or I didn't know I would need to be during the COVID and things, but, I'm doing my best. And I said to you, give me some tips along the way, which of course I welcome. But one of the things you said is the most important thing is to be interested. And that that makes a lot of sense. And that's what we can do as human beings with each other as well, right? Is just be interested, and then we can pull so much life out of somebody.
Yeah, curiosity. I mean, as Einstein said, he said, "I'm not particularly smarter than anyone else. I'm just very curious." And curiosity is what really that's what makes you alive. Is learning new things, meeting new people, having new adventures, looking at things a different way than you may have looked at them before. It's all a part of being interested in life.
Yes.
And it also fits in, very, very hand in glove with our spiritual life.
Yes.
It's being interested in what it is that's going to make your life more complete and a little more fulfilling. And that's what, it is. It is being interested, and interviewing is so much fun because of that. It's because I just love asking people's questions. I'd like to look behind the curtain, find out what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's having that's I just love the behind the scenes stories. I love those kinds of things. And most people do. That's
where the good juice is, isn't it? That's why actually when I travel, I don't like to do the tourist thing necessarily, because there's so much good life story off the main road.
Absolutely. That's where you want to go. I mean, you want to go where the locals go. You want to go off the beaten path and just see what you can discover. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Take a little pause here, Don. We've got a couple comments coming in. Let's see. Just want to see where we stand here and get caught up with everybody listening. Adair says, started enjoying watching football because of Gale Sayers. Let's see. Jeff. Okay, well, we're going to skip that one. Jeff, well, yeah, no, his rates just went up for private announcements. Oh, here we go. Well, your buddy Gilmore's on here, and he's saying,
of course he is.
You're surprisingly articulate, he says. He wants to know your favorite celebrity interview, and with racial tensions lately, can you tell us Tony Bennett's amazing military story? So Gilmore's prodding you for some material.
Oh yeah,
well, Gilmore.
I was very fortunate to interview Tony Bennett. I was just thrilled to death, and we were. Two things about Tony Bennett is a guy who never forgot where he came from, ever. He had to work his tail off when he was a kid to help support the family because his father died when he was very young. His mother was a seamstress. She used to bring home work from the factory on the train so that she could work at home in Queens. Wow. So she worked very, very hard. And Tony became a singing waiter and anything he could do to support his family. And then he was drafted into the Army, and he had become very good friends with an African-American soldier, and they were going to, I believe it was a Thanksgiving special thing. He was in in Germany, I believe. He was stationed in Germany. This was during World War II. And they went into the enlisted man's club and they said, I'm sorry, your friend can't come in.
Mm.
Enlisted men's club was segregated. They had a separate one for African Americans. And Tony Bennett basically said, well, screw you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and his platoon sergeant got wind of what had happened. And he said, okay, you want to do this? He assigned both of them to probably the worst duty there is in the service, and that's to collect the bodies of the dead and to process them and haul them around. And it's on one hand is considered an honor to do that, but it's also, as you might imagine, an awfully grisly job. And
it hit you, wouldn't it? Yep.
And that was given to him and his African American friend. And Tony said from that time on, he said, I just became this huge advocate for civil rights, for equal rights. And he said it made such an impact on him with what was going on. I mean, because you had guys over there, everybody was fighting the same battle, but they weren't treated equally.
Yep.
So that's one of the things. And when I was interviewing Tony, the housekeeping people, a lady came in with her cart and it was kind of squeaky and it was picking up on the recorder. So I said, maybe we got to wait for a second until she's finished. And he says, okay. And she finished and she was leaving. And he said, oh, there's an envelope on the table for you. He left her a gratuity when she came in. And she left and he just went on. He said, you know, these people work so hard. He said, you can't believe how hard these people work. And he said, they make slave wages. He said, it's amazing in this country how hard they have to work to make a living. I mean, he was just so compassionate. That's what really struck me about him.
Yeah.
So compassionate. Stay
connected to where you come from, especially when it's that challenging. It humble you. Life will humble you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, he's a celebrity and he knows it, but he also is in charge, is really in touch with where it came from.
Yeah, right on.
Very much.
What have you learned along the way, Don? What through all the experience you've had, through all the people you've met, what's a nugget or two you can share with us that you've learned, that you apply, that humbles you or keeps you grateful, that moves your heart, that stirs you?
Yeah, quite a few things actually, but I mean, most recently, within this last 10, 12 years, it has been Thoreau. And what my favorite quote from Thoreau is, it doesn't matter what you look at. What matters is what you see. And that has been a very big lesson to me, because what we look at can, if we just take that at face value, boy, you know, you can go out and shoot yourself. You know, you've got to look at things from a much broader perspective and on a much deeper level. And that is one thing that has always stuck with me. The other thing was my grandfather. I was 8 years old. I'm walking down the street with my grandfather one day, and I see that there was a guy, and he was obviously in a bad way. He was on drugs or dementia or something. But he was standing on the corner, and he was just talking to himself, just talking. And I said to I'd never seen that before. I said to my grandfather, I said, Grandpa, why is that man standing over there talking to himself? And my grandfather said to me, Donnie, don't ever try to figure people out, or you'll be crazier than they are.
Wow. That's rich.
And that is actually a very good piece of advice.
That's rich. Yeah.
You don't know the road they've walked. You cannot possibly know it. So where they are, and don't try to figure it out. Which the only thing you can do at the moment is be compassionate and be charitable. I mean, you can't figure it all out.
Can't figure it out. We can do our best to figure ourselves out, right?
And most of us are still trying.
Infinitely. So when was it? The late 90s, you were introduced to the science of mind. Did it change the trajectory of your career, the arc of your life? How did it?
Yes, it did, because being involved with show business and auditioning and getting what they call the eternal rejection, really changed what the science of mind did for me was change the way I looked at things. Going back to Thoreau, it changed the way I looked at things because I understood that it's not personal. You know, like the Four Agreements says, it's not personal. Don't take it personally. They can only pick one. So of the 200 people who read for this spot, 199 of them did not get it. Don't take it personally. Only one got it. So I said it's not rejection, it's selection. That's what it is. And it really helped me. It really helped me to see the big picture, and also to know that my life is absolutely progressing on the way it's supposed to progress. Challenges will come up, things will happen, and you just have to look at them as bumps in the road and know how to navigate them.
Was it a challenge to incorporate that into your belief system, your thinking?
Yeah, it was in a way, but for me it was kind of like a lifesaver because it just saved me so much angst. I said, I don't want to be in this pain anymore of always beating myself up because I didn't land a gig. I don't want to do that. That's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. And you know, would I put up with someone else beating me up for it? No. Right. I'm not, and so therefore I'm not going to beat me up for it either. And so it just taught me to have or as my wife says, as Lori says, hold things lightly. Just let's not put too much charge on this all. It is what it is, and you move through it. Yeah. And it really did help me in that way. So I've become a lot less attached to results, and a little more involved in the process. Yeah, and just do the work, and good things. Good, you know. I just did a show. We did Anything Goes over at the Rancho Mirage Amphitheater with Gilmore and our dear late friend Brian Miller, and it was such a wonderful experience. And we had such a wonderful time. It was just joyful. It was all joy, hard work and joy. And it was so wonderful because if you just get the pleasure in the work, that's all that matters. And then, you know, we happened to, you know, Gilmore and Brian and I, and I mean, we somehow got nominated for a theatrical, Desert Theatrical Award or something. And it's wonderful.
Just somehow, huh, Don? Somehow.
Somehow, but you know, those aren't the things that matter. Yeah. But you know, my fervent wish right now is you know, we lost Brian on Saturday night, and it would be great if he won. We had so much joy, and it was great for Brian because it was really his swan song as a performer, and it was just so wonderful watching him work because we knew, you know, all of us knew he was battling things, and it was just so terrific to watch the joy that he brought to that part and to the show. So you know, things like that bring perspective. So landing a gig or you know, things like that, it is what it is. You will or you won't. And but the important things is the joy that you get from the work, the joy you get from the people that you meet along the highway, and the friends that you make, and it's a wonderful experience. You know, and like I say, it's the process. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. The hearts of our center and I know our community are with you and Lauren Gilmore. I know you're listening in. We love you, and we're all here with you. There are no words when we come to a time like this. It's just we keep living and loving on each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, we keep
Yeah.
loving each other. Don, you also, in addition to all the other things you've done, you've also taught high school. I have to ask this before we get out of here because you dared me to do it. Taught high school speech and debate and had a famous student. Who was that?
Well, it was a young kid who was he was a child actor, and his name was Ron Howard. Apparently he went on to direct or something. I don't know.
Or something.
But yeah, he was in my class. I only taught for 1 year at Burroughs High School in Burbank, and he was one of my students. And actually, Renee Russo was also there, but I don't remember her.
Mm.
But he was an incredible student, very, very, very good student, very mature. I mean, he was one of those kids in high school who really knew who he was already. He wasn't going through all of the acne and angst that the other kids were going through.
Yeah.
He was very secure in who he was.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like he remembered where he came from too, because he's definitely one of the most successful directors.
Absolutely,
that we've seen. I know my daughter's one of her favorite movies is How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and the Christmas movies. But that's another one Ron Howard did that we love in our household.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
That's it.
Yeah.
And what's great in that film too is that Jim Carrey actually does an improv. Make fun of Ron Howard when he puts the hat on and he's kind of.
He's brilliant. Yeah. Carrey is brilliant. He's absolutely.
Tell us about working with Ronald Reagan.
Well, that was an interesting story because it just sort of happened. I was working in radio in the Midwest, and I decided after my youngest son Morgan was born, he was born back in Illinois. He was just months old, and in my infinite wisdom, I told my then wife, Robin, I said, I think it's time to go back to LA. She said, you don't have a job waiting for you. I said, no, but something will happen. And she looks at me, she says, oh, giving me the look like, well, okay, we'll do it. As it was, she dropped everything so I could run away and join radio. She came with me. It was like joining the circus.
Don Savage 3-ring circus.
Oh my God! I was working in LA, and I said I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. I had a variety of jobs. I was a claims adjuster for Hartford Insurance. I hated it, and I met a disc jockey, and he said, you sound like you have a decent voice. Why don't you go to broadcasting school and get in radio? So I went home and I told Robin about it, and she said, really? And I said, yeah. Why not? So she said, okay. So we scraped the money together for tuition to go to broadcasting school. And then I set tapes out all over the world to try to get a job. And the first offer I got was Twin Falls, and I grabbed it. So I took a 60% pay cut to move to Twin Falls, Idaho. And man, it was an amazing journey, but we came back to California. I didn't have a job to go to. And I was looking around to do something, and I finally got a job at a radio syndicator called O'Connor Creative Services, and they did syndicated radio shows. Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. did a show on there. Elliot Janeway and William Simon, who was former Secretary of the Treasury, had a show on there. Martin Milner, if you remember, Martin Milner had a cop show on there. He was with Adam 12. And so anyway, but Ronald Reagan had a daily commentary show that he did 5 minutes daily, and it was on over 400 radio stations at the time. And this was the time between the time he was governor and the time that he ran for president. And so it was my job to record him when he would come in. He would come in every 3 weeks and record 15 of his commentary shows. And I was my job to record him. And he was as I always hasten to say, our politics were like 180 degrees apart, but he was one of the nicest, warmest men I've ever met. And I'm in the process of writing a book about a lot of the interviews and everything, but as I've stated, I said, when he shook your hand, he meant it. And when he talked to you, you were the only person in the room. And that's the way he was. And I just loved him to death. I mean, he was just so personable. And, you know, he would come in, and one time he came in and he was in the recording booth, and he told this really incredibly dirty joke. And some of the people who were in the recording studio we were all cracking up. And I got on the intercom and I said, "Governor, that was the funniest joke you've ever told." I said, "I'm so glad I had it recorded." And all the blood drained from his face. He said, you didn't, did you? And I said, "No, Governor." I said, "I'm kidding." And the look on his face was funnier than the joke.
Oh,
it was so funny. But I did that for 9 months, and then I got a job at KACE in LA, and I left that job. But it was a thrill working with Reagan. It was.
So how many of those interviews did you do? Or how much interaction did you have with him over time?
Well, I probably did maybe 10 sessions with him.
Oh, cool.
10
Okay.
recording, maybe 9. I don't know. But you know, he would come in, and Mike Deaver, who was his chief of staff or his main assistant guy, would always come in with him, and they wrote the commentaries together, I believe. And he was a marvelous actor, because people don't give him a lot of credit for how good he really was. He very seldom did he need a retake. It was like one take Reagan. And if there was a little problem and we had to go back, I remember there was one time where we had to go back, and he was talking about this very heartwarming event, and his voice cracked, and he started to get a little bit emotional, and he actually had a tear in his eye. And we had to go back and do the retake, and damn, if he didn't get emotional and have that same tear in his eye the second time. I mean, he knew how to turn it on.
Activate it. Yeah.
He was an actor. Yeah, he was a very good actor. You know?
Love it. What did you think of him as a president?
What's the next question?
Actually, I wanted to go back to. Did you want to say wait the next question?
No. I mean, one of the reasons I got out of teaching was because of him, and that's because when he was governor, they changed a lot of the educational requirements. Speech was no longer a requirement. It used to be a requirement in California, and so therefore, nobody, most kids in high school would rather have a lobotomy rather than get up and give a speech.
Yeah.
So nobody took it as an elective, So I got stuck. I was going to get stuck teaching 1 speech class and 5 English classes, and I was not qualified. And I said, "This isn't for me. I can't do this." So that was the reason. And as I say, there's a lot of things about Reagan. I think one of the things I will say about Reagan that I really firmly believe, I think he had a good heart. I think he had a genuinely good heart. I think, in my own personal opinion, I'm not putting this on anybody else, I just think he was a little misguided in some things. But I can't deny the fact he had a good heart.
So he was called the great communicator. Do you think that came from acting, from the work that he did with that, and his heartfulness, kind of a blend of things?
I think he was very genuine. I really think he was a very genuine man. Because when you met him, you never got the sense that he was. You know how you meet some people and you just have a sense they're not being
a little shifty,
not being real. They're not real. He was always real, and I think that's to his great credit. I think he was just a nice man. I really do.
What tell us a little. Well, actually, I want to go back real quick. The Brian and Gilmore, and Brian and the play that you did. How recent was that? And that you were nominated?
That was in February. We did that with Desert Theatricals.
Can folks see that? How can folks be exposed to that? Is that something that's available or not right now?
I have no idea. I think they said they were taping it, but I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if that happened. But Desert Theatricals they do a whole season over at the Rancho Mirage Amphitheater. It's a gorgeous, and Desert Theatricals is top notch. Ray Lamone and Josh Carr are the producers, and they are absolutely phenomenal. And they come to our center, as a matter of fact. So, but I will give them a shout out. They do an incredible job. Their stuff is top notch. They get all sorts of awards all the time.
Say their names again, Don.
Josh Carr and Ray Lamone. And they're amazing producers. If you ever have a chance to see anything they're involved in, go, because it's well worth it. It really is.
Excellent.
I was thrilled to be able to be cast in that show because I knew their reputation, and to be able to get cast in that show, I said, "Oh God, this is great." I was just so pleased to be able to do that show.
Yeah, being attached to anything they put together is
absolutely. You just put me in, coach. I'll bat ninth. I don't care. Just put me in, coach.
Just put me in. And what a feather in our cap too that they come to our center. That's so wonderful. I mean, I'm getting the sense, since I am, I'm the new kid on the block still, and I only had really 2 months of exposure to the center before, we went into lockdown here.
Right.
I can't wait to get back together and kind of put the puzzle together of who's who and what's what, and get to know people so much better, like this moment, and Josh and Ray, and just we have a collection of amazing human beings in our center.
They would be a fascinating interview to do. I mean, if you ever would like them, and I'm sure they probably would be up for it. But like, as I say, people who are so together. I mean, putting on a show there are so many pieces to the puzzle, and to be able to do it as seamlessly as they do it is just, it's a marvel. They just have it wired. They know what they're doing. They know how to do it. They know when to do it. And it's just a marvel. So
love it.
Yeah.
Will you share a little bit more about your book? You say you're working on a book.
Well, I don't know that it's so much a book, but it is. I think it's going to be a book. I've just told a lot of stories over the years to my friends and my family about, like the stuff we're talking about, some of the interviews I've done, and interesting things. And people genuinely seem to be interested in the stories. And, I sort of feel like the old uncle in the attic who keeps repeating the same stories over and over.
That's great.
So maybe they're just being nice, but they, many people have told me on numerous occasions, you ought to put this in a book. I think these stories are really, really interesting. And so I said, yeah, maybe so. And you got to remember, the longest thing I've ever written in my life is like a 60-second, commercial or a radio script, and that's not a book. So this is a whole different bag, as you can understand. So, but when COVID hit, come January and February, and we got into this whole thing, one of the things that went through my mind is that, gee whiz, Lori is going to be stuck in the house with me for who knows how long. How long will it be until I finally get on her nerves and I end up buried in the backyard? Now, I know that wouldn't really happen. She'd hire somebody to do that. But the idea is, I said, I got to do something creatively here. What am I going to do? I mean, I was working on Anything Goes, and we were in rehearsal for that, and we did that in February. But then I said, what else? So I have my voiceover projects that I do, but they don't take that much time. So I decided, well, why don't I do this? Let's go ahead and I'll start to write this down. And at the very least, it would be something to leave to my grandkids so that they could read it later on and sort of find out what the old man did for a living. So that's what I decided to do. I said, this is really for the grandkids, but maybe somebody else will like it too. And so that's basically what I embarked on. So I'm in the middle of it right now. It's kind of painstaking because I'm going through all of the interviews and getting all the interview bites and getting all the quotes and everything. And I want to put it into because some of these people were just so interesting, Johnny Rivers and Justin Hayward of the Moody Blues and people like that. And George Shearing, the great jazz pianist. All of these people had such wonderful stories. And I just want to make sure that I get the meat in there. Yeah, I'm not including everything, but the big things.
Not to put you too much on the spot, you mentioned hoping to have it done by the end of the year. How's that looking?
Yeah, it's looking like it might happen. It depends. It depends on a matter. There are some days where it's a little bit. I just don't feel it, But on those days, what I do is I just go through the interviews and I start typing out the quotes because I'm transcribing the quotes. So I just do that. That's kind of brainless. Just do that. Then the writing that goes around it, I will do when I feel a little more creative juices coming along. Yeah. So that's how I compartmentalize it right now. And I think it works pretty well for me.
Right on.
You know, some days everything flows and other days, you know.
Don, toughest interview you ever had?
Let's see. Well, there were two that were a little daunting. One was Ray Brown, and I don't know if you know who he is. He was a jazz bass player.
Okay.
He holds the record, I believe, for being on the most recordings of any other musician in history. I think he was on over 2,300 recordings in his life. He was married to Ella Fitzgerald for a quick minute. But he played in her band, and he had his own trio for many, many years. But the publicist told me when I went out to interview him, before I went to interview him, she said, make sure you're prepared. She says, because he's a stickler. If he gets the sense that you don't know what you're talking about, he will just end the interview. Mm. And I said, okay. And she said, and do not mention Ella. And I said, good to know.
Good to know.
Good to know. Thank you for giving me the heads up. I mean, it's always good to have those heads up when you're going into an interview. And I always so thankful that people kind of prepare the soil for me, you know?
Sure.
So I went in to do the interview, and he was talking about, he started out basically on piano, but they didn't have enough pianos at the music room in his school, but they had a stand-up bass. And so he says, I just decided to take up the bass. And I said, well, they're such totally different kinds of instruments, aren't they? And he says, no, not really. And I said, oops, okay. What does he mean by that? Why he's testing me? And all of a sudden I'm asking all these questions, and he starts naming off some people that he's played with. And a lot of these people I have never heard of. And some of them I have, but obviously he knows more about jazz than I'll ever know. And so I know he's poking and prodding. He's testing me. And so what I did is what I learned over the years. You were asking me what a secret.
Yep.
I try to find something obscure about that artist that I can pull out of my back pocket if I need to save it. Mm. And there was an obscure album he did in Las Vegas in 1977 with Count Basie. Mm. Just him and Count Basie, just a bass and piano. And I pulled out the album and I said, this album really fascinates me, Ray. How did you guys come to? And he said, oh my God, you got that album? He was so thrilled I had that album, and everything was smooth sailing after that. Wow. Everything was smooth. It just went like glass, and he was just brilliant. I mean, he knew so much about music. It was a guy, he was actually very metaphysical. Because I asked him, I said, when you record, I said, how do you get your songs together? Because, jazz is kind of a free form sort of a thing. And he said, well, when we go to record a song, we all know how we're going to start the song. And we all know how we're going to end the song. He said, it's the middle where the magic happens. Mm. That's where we don't know what's going to happen, but we know it's going to be magic.
That's life, right? That is.
Absolutely. L-I-F-E. We all know there's a beginning.
Yeah.
And we all know there's going to be an end. But what's
the magic in the middle?
What's the magic in the middle? And then the other tough interview I had was with Michael Feinstein, who's a recording artist, cabaret singer, and he's made quite a career for himself. In fact, him and Brian both started playing in piano bars around the same time.
Oh, right on.
In LA. And I was doing my first interview with him in 1996, and I got to his home. He had this little house up in Hollywood, up by the Hollywood sign. And I got there and I was 15 minutes early. But you never know what traffic's going to be like in LA. So, I mean, I always try to be a little early. I don't want to make people wait. They're giving me their time, so it's respect. Well, anyway, I got there, I knock on the door, and he had just come in off the road. I could tell his bags were still in the hallway. And he opens the door, and he looked a little frenetic. And I said, hi, I'm Don. I'm here for the interview. And he says, you're early. And I said, oh, I said, well, I'm sorry. I said, you know, I didn't know what the traffic was going to be. Well, he said, I'm not ready for you. And I said, well, I said, that's not a problem. I said, I tell you what, why don't you just show me where to set up and let me go, I'll set up my equipment and then you go in and, you know, do what you have to do. And I said, you know, I said, I have all the time in the world. Don't feel rushed. He said, all right. So he shows me where to use it. Set up here. Okay. So he comes in. And so the first part of the interview, I mean, Michael's a very nice man, but first part of the interview was a little bit distant. He was not quite as engaged. So I said to myself, what do I pull out of my back pocket here? So because he is a throwback to another age, he just loves the old music. He really is a student. He's actually a historian of music. And so I asked him the question. I said, do you ever feel that you were born 30 years too late? And he said, all the time. And all of a sudden he got really engaged. And from then on, the interview went well, and I interviewed him twice since, and I've gotten to know him, and it went well. But, you know, those are the situations where the interview can go south very quickly if you don't have a way to save it. And he would tell it, he used to work for Ira Gershwin during the last 6 years of Ira's life as he used to compile all of his recordings and music and everything. And he told me a story about Ira. He said, we were going through something and Ira said, oh yeah, this song. He said, yeah, I think Georgie and I, he says, Georgie and I wrote this, I think 1932 or 33. And Michael said, no, Ira, you guys wrote it for Girl Crazy in 1930, but you didn't use it. And Ira said, oh, he said, well, you have an advantage over me. He said, you studied my life. I just lived it.
That's great. That's a good line. Makes sense.
Yeah, you know, so yeah, but anyway, but those are really the only two that ever were a little bit on the iffy side. Every other interview has gone pretty well, I think.
Well, I appreciate you holding me up during this hour.
Oh,
we're already at the top of the hour, which is
oh my God, it's just gone by. It's flown by.
Flown by. Last thing I want to ask you, Don, you mentioned that, you know, you wanted to set up a creative space for you, something so your wife didn't do whatever she was going to do. What's one thing you can share with our audience today, who our community today? What's something you've learned over these past 7 months that you think it's important to offer our community?
Well, number one, I think I'm very fortunate. You know, I have a wife, we live in the same house, we have this companionship. There are a lot of people who live alone. There are a lot of people who don't have that sense of community in this sort of a situation. I mean, to me, the important thing is to expand your net. Call people, talk to people, communicate with them. If you can't see, I mean, you know, things are a little bit looser now. You can meet somebody at a socially distanced lunch and things like that. But I think those are the things you need to do: is pick your spots, be safe, be prudent, but at the same time, don't lose connection with people. Because with Lori and I, and with Brian and Gilmore and Joyce and our friends John and Marcia and Nancy and all of these people that we hang out with on a regular basis, all from the center, as a matter of fact. But we have developed this little niche of people, this little pod of people that we stay in touch with. And Eric and Judith, or another two that we hang out with all the time, so that it's a way to stay sane, in a way to stay connected. And that's you've got to reach out, you've got to work at it. You know, you can't just wait for somebody to call you. Pick up the phone and call them. I would say that's the thing to do. Don't
get too into your own head and do a vacuum.
Absolutely.
Got to stay out there. Don Savage, thank you so much for your time today.
Reverend Charles.
What a true gift. I'm grateful for you.
Oh, and I'm grateful for you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you taking an interest in me. I do. I really do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're actually staying, I think if you're talking about Marcia Merkin, we're staying kind of in the entertainment theme this week.
Oh.
She's going to be my guest on Thursday.
Oh, so. Marcia is a treasure trove, that woman.
Yeah.
She's done a lot. She is quite accomplished.
Love it. Well, I can't wait for that that hour as well. So yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Don. Everybody
Thank you.
have an extraordinary day. We've got our regular programming tomorrow. It's Jafon and myself. Wednesday is a Sensational Six. Thursday is Marsha Merkant, as I mentioned. Friday, it's Back to Life on Love with myself. And then we keep rolling and rolling through these times. Life is good and we're very blessed, and I'm grateful for that. Don Savage, thank you so much. Have a magnificent day.
You too. Thank you, Reverend Charles.
Okay. Much love. Community, God bless you. Have a really good day. Peace and love. Make it the best day ever.